When the sun comes up on America, across open fields, small towns, and city streets, a new day begins. And here, we rise with it. This is where hard work meets headlines, where truth matters, and America wakes up informed.
An interesting week.
They all are.
This is your country. This is your morning. This is Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. America, let's do it together.
Love you, Ivy.
Love you too.
And it starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan. This is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak on this Monday, July 6th of 2026. Good morning. And here are three big things you need to know. One, President Trump is preparing to attend the upcoming NATO summit in Turkey later on this week. He's also speaking to several world leaders ahead of that trip. According to a Kremlin spokesperson, Trump offered to help find a solution to the Ukraine war during a nearly 90-minute phone call over the weekend with Vladimir Putin. Also, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said he spoke to Trump on the 4th of July. Number two, more than 700 firefighters, and that number is growing, battling a Colorado wildfire that's grown to nearly 87,000 acres as of yesterday. It's only 6% contained. The Aspen Acres fire started last week in southern Colorado. It spread quickly, fanned by hot, dry winds out there. More than 10,000 people have been evacuated near Pueblo, Colorado, again, as of yesterday. And number three, the husband of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is suspected of crashing into a parked car and then driving away from the scene. Happened Friday afternoon in Northern California. Paul Pelosi allegedly struck a vehicle, causing major rear damage, according to the sheriff's office. Pelosi then was apprehended, apparently admitted to hitting something, he said, but told officers he didn't know what he hit, so he just kept driving. Told deputies he continued to drive until his vehicle became disabled, so his vehicle suffered damage as well. Paul Pelosi for you. And that's where we start our number one of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber on this Monday morning. Welcome back to the work week after what I hope was a wonderful Independence Day weekend. America 250. I admit I didn't stay up late enough to watch the big, giant fireworks display in Washington, D.C. on Saturday nights after the rain delay, but I saw some replays, looked fabulous. I saw some first-person testimony about how wonderful it was. Great weekend in D.C., great weekend across the country, I hope. And we saw contrasting visions from Mayor Mamdani in New York and President Trump in Washington, D.C. We'll hear about those in just a couple of minutes. I will say it was a great time to be here at Hillsdale College, where, we celebrate America around here. Had a great big picnic on Friday afternoon. President Larry Arnn put it on for faculty, for staff, for neighbors, for people here in Hillsdale. We also watched in our Cyril Center here in the auditorium, Plaster Auditorium, the debut of Revolutionary America for us here on campus. It was in theaters for a couple of days at the beginning of July. I hope you saw it. And now it's on YouTube if you want to see it. I just checked the numbers yesterday. More than 350,000 views since it was released on Friday. This nearly 2-hour-long documentary of Revolutionary America. Great for families, great for the kids. Features a bunch of Hillsdale faculty members. Also, Eric Metaxas is in there. Michael Knowles, a few others. Wonderful storytelling, great documentary. And that's how we spent a portion of our Independence Day weekend watching Revolutionary America from Hillsdale College, which is now available on YouTube. Tom Selleck narrates. How cool is that? So check that out when you have the opportunity. But as I mentioned, we got contrasting visions of America. And this helps set the stage for the fight that's coming in November, but one that will carry on far beyond that till at least 2028 and likely far beyond that. The vision of democratic socialists in America and the vision of patriots like President Trump. Let's hear from New York City's mayor first. I give you the down stuff first, and we'll leave on an up note with President Trump. Mayor Mamdani put out this recorded, it kind of looked like a hostage video. He had people standing all around him holding American flags, but you've never seen anyone so sad to be celebrating America, so sad to be holding an American flag. Mayor Mamdani looked dour as well. Listen to him here. We'll start with cut 13. This is the message that he chose to deliver to New York City and, by extension, America as well. On the 4th of July, New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani, cut 13.
We are told that America is exceptional because we are richer, stronger, more powerful than everyone else. The truth, my friends, is that America is exceptional because here, nothing is fixed into place. The frontier may be closed, we may have walked on the moon, but the work of fulfilling the values first enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, that work endures, and it belongs to us all.
Mayor Mamdani, we're great because we're rich, strong, and powerful. Is that how you describe America to people you talk to? I love America because we're rich and powerful. I doubt that. We love America because of what it stands for. We love America because here everyone has an opportunity. We love America because here we protect those God given rights. It's not because we're the richest, strongest, most powerful nation. That's not why most Americans love the country. And nothing is fixed in place. The great thing about America is things are fixed in place through the Declaration, more specifically through the Constitution. We have these things that have lasted now for 250 years. The fact that those important things about the country are fixed is what's very important about America. More from Mayor Mamdani, and if you're watching us on video, you'll see the people around him here looking so sad to be in this country. This is cut number 10, Zoran Mamdani on the 4th of July, his message.
As we mark 250 years, what do we see? We see a city of contradictions within a nation of contradictions. We see the wealthiest country in the history of the world, one where children go to sleep hungry while the world's first trillionaire hungers for more. We see monopolies that dominate every industry and oligarchs who buy elections. We see masked agents terrorizing our streets, eating food cooked by our undocumented neighbors before spiriting them away in unmarked vans. We see a nation whose immense wealth has been built by those with calloused, dirt-streaked hands, those who toil on factory floors and chisel into stone. And we see a nation that has allowed so much of that wealth to be held instead in the soft hands of a precious few.
Soft hands of a precious few. This is back to AOC's idea that you can't earn $1 million. You can't have a great idea be worth $1 million. It has to be earned through toil and sweat and labor. Very quickly, I want to leave on the up note. President Trump, Saturday, cut 14.
Across the generations, Americans have fought, bled, and died, not just to secure those rights, but to expand them to citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed, because we are one people. We are one family. You showed that tonight with one flag. And as our Declaration of Independence tells us, we are all made in the image of one Almighty God. And a communist will never say that. That's for sure.
That's President Trump. We got to talk more about that next. We'll come back. Democrats saying, yeah, socialists, we'll take them. More next on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in this morning on this Monday, getting you back into the work week after an Independence Day weekend. Thanks for being alongside. I realized I forgot to give you an introduction. Always new Daybreak viewers and listeners all the time. Hi, I'm Scott Bertram. I'm filling in for Steve and Ivy today. I am here at Hillsdale College, where I serve as general manager of our award-winning student radio station here, WRFH. I'm also a lecturer in journalism. I teach in our journalism department, and I'm director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings. I host a number of podcasts in the wild, including the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, heard on many fine radio stations across this country. It also is a podcast out on Friday mornings. Had a great Independence Day special this past Friday with a couple of our Hillsdale professors, Khalil Habib, and also Dr. Bill McClay was on this past Friday show. You can check that out. Host a show called Political Beats, talking with political people about music via National Review and elsewhere. I host a show about Saturday Night Live, going through the years of the program. You find me in many places, but it's all corralled at scottbertram.com or at Scott Bertram. All right, we heard the competing visions between Mayor Mamdani and President Trump as we closed the first segment of the program. And this is the contrast that we will see leading to November and leading to the 2028 election. Let's be very clear and intentional about this. There's going to be a fight between people who love America, who found this past weekend to be a time of joy, to celebrate our country and all the good while acknowledging some of the bad and some of the problems. But the fact we're always striving to be better and to live up to those founding documents. People who love the country and those who don't. You can say those who hate America. If we want to be a little charitable, we can say those who have no love for the country, who aren't proud of America. We've seen these recent polls saying Republicans, 85% are very proud or extremely proud of the country, and 26% of Democrats say they are proud of the country. It's a fight between those who are proud of the country and love America and those who aren't proud and those who don't like America and want to change it. We heard from Mayor Mamdani. Apparently, his wife had no time for America 250. A Fox News headline this morning, Mayor Mamdani's wife skips America 250 for Islamic spiritual retreat in Spain. That's the Fox News story today. And again, this split. I'm not the first person to use this analogy, but imagine telling your wife or your husband, boy, honey, I really love you. And I love you not because of what you are or what you've done, but I love you because of what you could be. And I love you because of the many ways I can change you to make you what I want you to be. That's not professing a love for America. That's the plot of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, essentially, for you youngsters. Excellent movie. Check out Alfred Hitchcock, Vertigo, although I think Rear Window's a bit better. That is not love for country. That is love of some idea or ideal that hasn't happened and won't happen. And this, to quote President Obama, of course, fundamentally changing our country. Who's doing the fundamental changing? Well, later on this hour, Greg Krell will be with us from Red Flags Press. They won't be alone, but they're starting an effort to better educate Americans about socialism, what it really is, what the economic system looks like, why it's always failed, and why it's a dead end here in America. You see Democratic socialists winning in places, even candidates who won't necessarily say explicitly they are Democratic socialists. Think the mayor of Chicago, Brendan Johnson. Think the U.S. Senate candidate here in Michigan, Abdul El-Sayed. Now, he has not officially said, I am a Democratic socialist, but he hangs out with Democratic socialists and he says the same thing as Democratic socialists. So, walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. You can make the conclusion you wish. Democrats might be expected to say, we don't want those socialists in our midst, and they're being given the opportunity to say so, but they won't. They like the energy that socialists bring to the party, and they like having those voters. Many Democratic candidates and office holders being asked about this, and almost all do not have the ability to say no, except John Fetterman. We don't want these people. We don't like these ideas. J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, likely, very likely, 2028 candidate for president, asked by CNN over the weekend about the Democratic Socialists and their success. And what do you think about that, J.B. Pritzker, as a Democrat? This is cut one.
Do you think that's good? Are their victories good for your party?
I think what's good is that there are Democrats who are standing up and fighting, that there are Democrats who are standing up and talking about and doing something about addressing the high cost of things. Affordability is an issue that everybody is feeling all across the country. And any Democrat that is standing up and speaking out about that, coming up with solutions for that, and importantly, doing it in a manner that is focused on fighting what Donald Trump is trying to do to raise prices on people, I think those are the people who are winning. So I'm not suggesting that I had one candidate or another in any of these races. I'm just suggesting that that is the recipe for winning in 2026 and I think beyond.
The recipe for winning in 2026 and beyond, according to J.B. Pritzker, is embracing socialism and those candidates who espouse it. J.B. Pritzker is going to find out very quickly what Mallory McMorrow found out here in Michigan. And we'll talk a bit more about this at the top of hour number 2 and actually into hour 3, because it's a good window into what's happening in the Democratic Party. Mallory McMorrow, a state senator in Michigan, running for U.S. Senate against Haley Stevens, who is a typical run-of-the-mill liberal Democrat, and Abdul El-Sayed, who represents the far, far left wing of the party. Mallory McMorrow, as a state senator, was just about the most progressive candidate you could imagine. Not a socialist, but very progressive. And as my friend Dan McLaughlin wrote over the weekend, he's going to join us later on this show too. What did he say? When you sell crazy, you can always be outbid by someone who really means it. Mallory McMorrow tried to be as left as possible, but she got outbid, outflanked on her left by Abdul El-Sayed. J.B. Pritzker, a billionaire for socialism, thinks he can pull off the same trick to run as far left as quickly as he can. He's going to find out he can always be outbid by someone crazier, by someone who actually is a democratic socialist. All right, more next. Scott Bertram in on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Monday morning all across this wonderful country of ours. Thanks for being alongside. We heard J.B. Pritzker. He was not alone over the weekend. Wes Moore, the Democrat governor, asked the same thing. Hey, he embraces the socialist takeover of his party. Gavin Newsom says the same thing. Democrats are going to allow this to happen, it appears. We'll hear more about that throughout the program. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by The Wellness Company. This summer, patriotic Americans from coast to coast celebrating the 250th birthday of the greatest country in the world. By the way, that doesn't have to stop just because July 4th has come and gone. We can still celebrate 250 throughout the year. This nation founded by brave patriots who declared their independence from our British overlords. This summer is not only a good time to reflect on 250 years of American exceptionalism, it's also a great time to channel some of that American individualism. Declared your independence from Big Pharma and the broken medical establishment. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. You see and hear from TWC doctors all the time here with Steve, and you know their products are the gold standard for keeping you and your family safe and healthy. The Wellness Company gives you the opportunity to make sure you are prepared for whatever happens with their series of prescription medical kits that contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of these medications. By the way, we had big storms here in Michigan, elsewhere in the Midwest over the weekend. No power for a while. That's the kind of thing you have to be prepared for. Can't get a hold of someone, can't travel, got a big tree blocking your driveway. Okay. The Wellness Company also offers a variety of products from parasite cleanses to methylene blue, weight loss, so much more. Can help you stay healthy, live a longer and more satisfying life. Celebrate America's 250th birthday by declaring your independence from Big Pharma. Go to twc.health/Gruber today to order. That's twc.health/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber. Save 10% at the Wellness Company, twc.health/Gruber. Frank Mediter joins us next. His book, Cool Heroes for Boys, 20 True Tales of Adventure. Very neat. And also Greg Krell later on this hour from Red Flags Press, trying to inform and educate Americans about the dangers and realities of socialism. That's all coming up this hour. Still, Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak.
Bernie Jo-
Nope, I don't have them.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in this morning. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM. Also over at scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings. Thanks so much for being alongside. Scheduled to be joined by Greg Krell in just a bit from Red Flags Press. They're trying to do a job of informing, educating Americans about what socialism actually is. And I think after this Independence Day and after America 250, the official celebration, although, as I said, you can continue celebrating America 250 all year long. We certainly will here at Hillsdale. There's going to be a thirst for information and a thirst from people who haven't been plugged in about exactly what these democratic socialists believe and exactly what socialism is and exactly how it's played out in our past. And you could say, well, that's a small portion of the electorate and it's just a handful of Democrats on the left. And well, maybe at one point, that's not what we're seeing now. And that's not where the energy of the party is. Democrats are extremely unpopular, as you might know from polling. As much as people say they perhaps don't love President Trump, they also say they don't like Democrats at all. And what do they stand for other than being against Trump? And the Democratic Socialists at least have something they say they want to do. They want to fundamentally change the country, want to make it a socialist paradise. But it's something. And so people are going to be more curious about this. We played J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, saying, hey, socialists, welcome. That's where the energy, that's how we win in 2026 and beyond, by embracing the socialists. As I mentioned, he was not alone. Democratic Governor Wes Moore, who's also whispered about as a 2028 presidential contender, but I frankly don't see it. I don't see him being a real contender, but he'll be out there. He's also embracing the socialist takeover of his party. From Meet the Press, NBC News, this is Wes Moore being asked a similar question. What do you think about these Democratic Socialists winning in New York City for Congress, winning a primary in Colorado? And again, candidates who are not necessarily Democratic Socialists, but embrace the same ideas and goals. There's a Democrat running for governor in Wisconsin. There's, of course, the Democratic Abdul El-Sayed, who's running for the U.S. Senate nomination in Michigan, who embraced many of these same things. What about this Wes Moore? This is cut number 8.
Some of those candidates who find themselves successful have been Democratic socialists. We saw that in New York, saw it in Colorado. Do you think the Democrats should do a better job of embracing those types of candidates into the party?
I think Democrats would be doing themselves a disservice by saying who does not belong.
Who does not belong? Boy, I think back to 2016 and the policing that the media tried to do, and leftists, and I repeat myself, for the Republican Party. When Donald Trump began his rise to power, and Democrats and the media demanded Republicans say, this is not who we are. This is not what we believe. We don't want Donald Trump at our party. We don't want these Trump supporters at our party. They're not pushing Democrats to do the same. And certainly Wes Moore's position is, well, we don't want to, we got to have a big tent. We can't police these people who want socialism in our country. And the DSA candidates are very clear about this. They say this specifically and explicitly, that they're not really Democrats. They're using the party mechanism to sort of inject themselves into the party, use the mechanism to get elected, and then even change Democrats from within to drive them farther and farther to the left. And what you get when you get farther and farther to the left is a strain of anti-Semitism that also bubbles up. Abdul El-Sayed, and we're going to hear more from him at the top of the next hour because he had this incredible back and forth with CNN. And I give a small amount of credit to CNN, who appears for some reason to be pushing some of these Democratic socialists with questions that you wouldn't expect from the mainstream media. Abdul El-Sayed was asked about defunding the police and tweets that he had from years ago and why he took them down and couldn't answer the question and couldn't just simply say, I won't defund the police. We'll get back to that. But he was also asked about Israel. Does Israel have a right to exist? I think it's a fairly easy question to answer. Abdul El-Sayed asked about this with Cassie Hunt on CNN over the weekend. This is cut number 3. Abdul El-Sayed, again, the far, far left Democrat running for U.S. Senate and its nomination here in the state of Michigan, where I am. Cut number 3.
Do you believe Israel has a right to exist? So, Casey, AIPAC's become a big issue in this election because AIPAC's already spent $30 million in this election. They're by far the biggest spender in the race. Now, the question about a right to exist, it's interesting because nobody's ever asked me whether or not I believe Palestine has a right to exist. Every single president who served has said that they believe in a two-state solution. Israel exists. The question is whether or not we want a politics where our money is sent over to Israel to do genocide and apartheid instead of investing in our own kids.
You say it exists, but does it have a right to?
No, I didn't say that. I just said the question of Israel's existence is not a question. I'm not going to play this gotcha game about whether or not it has a right to exist. The question ultimately is about whether or not we want a politics that dignifies.
You're not going to play the gotcha game, but you're not going to say you think Israel has a right to exist.
Well, my question, Casey, I think the question we all ought to ask is, does everybody have equal rights to peace, dignity, and self-determination? That's Jewish, Israelis, and Palestinians. And to me, the folks who should answer what the ultimate peace there looks like should be Jewish, Israelis, and Palestinians. I want my tax dollars spent here in Michigan to provide schools in Michigan, to build healthcare in Michigan, to invest in Michigan, rather than to be sent abroad to kill Palestinian people, do genocides and apartheid.
All right, that's not happening. There's no genocide. There's no apartheid, as you well know. But Abdul al-Sayed can't say it. Can't say Israel has a right to exist. The left and the DSA and Democratic Socialists have a problem with Jews. That there's an anti-Semitism problem running rampant on the left, and that's how you get things like this. Now, you're going to hear an analyst first, and then a CNN anchor, Alex Michelson, who actually I've seen do pretty decent work here and there. He's not stating his opinion necessarily, but trying to reflect where the Democratic Party is at this very moment. Listen to this carefully. Analyst then Alex Michelson essentially saying, if you want to win right now in the Democratic Party, be less Jewish. This is cut number 2.
But on the Jewish thing, because he is,
wrap it up real quick.
I was saying he is Jewish. He might be the Democrat that can thread the needle, because even though he's Jewish, he's very critical of the Israeli government, very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has credibility on that issue. So it's possible that I think he could fill that lane in between the two extremes of the Democratic Party.
Ask Scott Wiener how that's working out for him.
Yeah, as a Jew, some people read a little more Jewish than other people, and John Ossoff may not read as Jewish as Josh Shapiro does, for whatever that's worth.
All right, that's Alex Michelson saying, I'm a Jew, and I can say, well, he doesn't seem quite as Jewish as the other guy, and that might be good for him if he doesn't seem very Jewish, because that's where the Democratic Party is these days. Josh Shapiro is too Jewish. John Ossoff doesn't seem quite as Jewish. That's Alex Michelson from CNN and anchor. Again, not necessarily stating an opinion, but saying that this is where the Democratic Party is right now. We're going to talk more about this next with Greg Krell from Red Flags Press about the infestation of socialism into the Democratic Party and the DSA winning in areas across the country and what Americans need to know, how we can teach them about socialism, but its evils, true evil. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Monday morning, easing you back into the work week after an Independence Day holiday weekend. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM. Greg Creel is with us right now from Red Flags Press. You can find more at redflagspress.org. They're also over on X as well. Greg, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Totally my pleasure, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on.
Saw this come across actually in the mail. Occasionally good things come in the mail. And it's good timing. Red Flags Press is a relatively new organization trying to inform and educate Americans about socialism, what it really is, what it really means, and why it's failed every time it's been tried. We've got a book. It's right there, if I can square that in. Socialism Says, Socialist Philosophy Straight from the Horse's Mouth. All right, tell us about how Red Flags Press got started, what the goal is for the organization.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you so much. We've just opened our door 2 months ago, but 5.5+ years ago, we saw the trends that were taking place, which have led to the recent, even more dire results with quote unquote democratic socialists winning elections. And we just felt there was a need for new and different content to illustrate the flaws of socialism. And we decided the way to do that was to use the words of socialists themselves rather than Greg's opinion or someone else's opinion. How about Karl Marx's opinion, Che Guevara's opinion, and so forth? So we spent 5 years reading countless socialist authored books and articles and culling out of those the things they were saying. They make it clear their philosophy is incredibly dangerous, and not only dangerous, but also really based on deceptive marketing. That was one of the interesting things we discovered. And then also, additionally, that there are these absurd premises that underpin the philosophy, that just things that they promise that can't possibly be delivered, that again reinforces the somewhat surprising aspect of the disingenuous nature of what the philosophy is. And we turn that into a series of free papers that are on the website, as well as into Socialism Says, our book, which visually illustrates 10 of those papers.
So, Greg, you say, quote unquote, democratic socialist. So what's the difference between a democratic socialist and a full-blown socialist?
As I see it, and actually as I would suggest to you, as socialists see it, there is no difference. And let me give you an illustration, if I may. I think one of the surprising facts we turned up, let me back up. Karl Marx. We know Karl Marx. He's been the basis of socialism for 150 years. He calls our rights nonsense and rubbish. His thinking underpinned every totalitarian socialist regime. Well, lo and behold, as we did our reading and research, we discovered that Michael Harrington, the founder of the Democratic Socialists of America, says that Marx should be considered a democratic socialist. Despite being a communist, despite calling our rights nonsense and so forth, Marx counts as a democratic socialist. Well, that's one of the facts we've turned up, of which there are numerous, but I think it's a stunning one that says that it's really simply a sham. If you can be a communist, you can be Karl Marx, a communist, and also be a democratic socialist. It by definition means there's no meaningful distinction. And I think it's time to stop calling them by their marketing slogan, a misleading marketing slogan, when that really what it is simply Marxism. End of story, as Michael Harrington has made clear.
Greg Creel with us from Red Flags Press, redflagspress.org. You can find their papers there. Also, this book, Socialism Says. Now, you kind of group this into three categories. It's a sham, it's absurd, and it's dangerous. But Greg, how do we really know that? Because as socialists are so fond of saying, real socialism has never been tried, right? I mean, we've never actually had any experience with real socialism, have we?
That's terrific. I love that. That is great. And I mean, I think the thing that they would like us to forget is that the USSR was sold as democratic socialism. Right from the start, and for decades afterwards, it was said to be the epitome of democratic socialism in action. Castro in Cuba, that was democratic socialism. Every regime that ultimately we look at now as being totalitarian and makes us think that, oh, this must be something new, was originally sold as being democratic socialism in action. in a funny way, actually, the fact that they argue that socialism has never been tried is very telling. Rather than arguing, oh, let us tell you what's changed about socialism and why it's no longer that problematic thing that caused these disasters, here's what's different. They simply argue it hasn't been tried. You would only make that argument if you couldn't possibly explain why it's different in any way.
Right. Greg, we just heard before you joined us a little bit of Democrats having their anti-Semitic problem. Abdul El-Sayed over the weekend on CNN, unable to say that Israel has a right to exist. Democrats saying, well, you know, that candidate, he might be too Jewish to win a Democratic primary these days. So I'm curious, does socialism and anti-Semitism always sort of wrap around each other, or are these two strange just coming together at the same time for Democrats and the left right now? Is anti-Semitism always sort of wrapped up inside socialism?
It has been from the get-go. It has been from the get-go wrapped in. And one little known aspect, of socialism is that it has a fixation, a fascist-like fixation with parasites, quote unquote, those who are deemed parasites. And right from the get-go, Jewish people have been denigrated by socialists, by dozens of socialists, before it infected Nazism. In fact, it was really the socialists who were anti-Semitic in so many different ways. So it's not something new. And the whole fixation with parasites and their suppression is broader than simply relating to Jews, but it obviously, the Jewish aspect is a critical part of it. And we actually document that in one of our papers on that specific topic.
Greg Creel from Red Flags Press. You can find more at redflagspress.org. Also over on X, and the book, in their own words, Socialism Says, Socialist Philosophy Straight from the Horse's Mouth. You can find that over on the website and elsewhere. Greg, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Unfortunately, you're coming along at a great time because your work will be needed here
right.
very, very, very quickly. Thanks so much for joining us, Greg.
Thank you so much for having me on. Have a great rest of the week.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertrand filling in on this Monday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. If you missed it over the weekend, Nathan's hot dog eating contest, Joey Chestnut wins once again. His 18th title at the Nathan's hot dog eating contest in New York City. Ate 66 hot dogs and buns in 10 minutes. That's 10 short of his record of 76, but still like 64 more than I probably could do. The women's competition, Miki Sudo cruised to her 12th win. She ate 39 hot dogs and buns. I think it might be an unpopular take or an unpopular opinion. I don't love these competitions. It seems like a bit of gluttony and a misuse of some of the gifts that God has given us. On the other hand, it's one day and it's a little bit of fun. I don't want to watch, so I don't watch. But if you like it, it's okay. 66 hot dogs and buns in 10 minutes for Joey Chestnut as he wins that title. Oh, Independence Day weekend, strong storms here in Michigan and elsewhere in the Midwest led to power outages. There are still a lot of people here in Michigan, tens of thousands, I think, without power as of this morning. That means no air conditioning. That means hot homes at night. You know what they could use? A ghost bed. You want a summer like last summer, barely sleeping because you're too hot all night long? People blame summer heat for bad sleep, but it could be their mattress trapping heat. If you already sleep hot, summer only makes it worse. That's why Ghost Bed is there. Helps keep you cool all night long. No waking up sweaty, tossing, turning. They have cooling technology built into every mattress. It's not an expensive upgrade you have to pay for. Hot sleepers are Ghost Bed's happiest customers. You can read the reviews. You get great support, less stiffness, a deeper sleep, and more rested mornings. Ghost Bed even gives you 101 nights to try it at home. Sleep all summer long, feel the difference for yourself, then make your decisions. You can't waste more summers on bad sleep. Ghost Bed having their 4th of July sale right now, offering an extra 10% off for the Daybreak audience. With financing, some Ghost Beds come out to around $1 a day. Go to ghostbed.com/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber. That's ghostbed.com/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber for the best deal on Ghost Bed. Hour 2 brings Margarita Mooney Clayton. Also, James Hohman for the Mackinac Center here in Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, national profile, taking another hit. More next on Daybreak.
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now on Real America's Voice.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, where we had a wonderful Independence Day weekend. This is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak this Monday, July 6th of 2026. Thanks for joining us. And here are three big things you need to know. Number one, President Trump paid homage to veterans, attacked communism, touted America's golden age at his 4th of July speech commemorating 250 years of American independence. Trump also used the opportunity to push the Save America Act, which would require voters to prove they're U.S. citizens to register and also show ID before casting a ballot. What a unique and novel idea. Number two, Charlie Kirk's widow is set to attend her first Utah court hearing in the wake of the trial of the man accused of killing her husband. Erica Kirk will be joined by Charlie Kirk's parents for the week-long preliminary hearing where prosecutors will lay out their case against Tyler Robinson. That hearing begins today. And number three, Mallory McMorrow dropping out of the Democratic Senate primary here in Michigan, where I am. McMorrow's departure sets the stage for a battle between Congresswoman Haley Stevens and the far left Abdul El-Sayed. Primary set for August 4th, the winner going on to face Republican Mike Rogers, who has the backing of President Trump. That's where we start our number two of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or at Scott Bertram on X, scottbertram.com as well. I'm here at Hillsdale College. I'm the general manager of our award-winning student radio station, also lecturer in journalism and director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. When I speak, guest host, as I always say, I speak for myself, not on behalf of the college. That should be abundantly clear. We start hour two by talking a bit about this Michigan U.S. Senate race, more because of how it might shift and change the national picture. We'll talk a little more in depth about Mallory McMorrow's dropout, which happened yesterday in hour three. But how does this change things? Democrats need to retain this U.S. Senate seat in Michigan if they want to have any hope of taking the Senate in November. It's a Democratic seat. It's opening up, and you could have now a choice between the far left Abdul El-Sayed, a Democratic socialist in everything but name, and Haley Stevens, who is a fairly run-of-the-mill liberal Democrat. Now, you will hear often now this being described as a race between the progressive Abdul El-Sayed and the moderate centrist Haley Stevens for this nomination. Let's be clear about this very quickly before we hear from Abdul El-Sayed. Haley Stevens is not a moderate. Haley Stevens is not a centrist. Haley Stevens, I looked this up a couple of months ago, because everyone describes her as a moderate centrist. New York Times, in their story yesterday about McMorrow dropping out, described Haley Stevens as a moderate. Haley Stevens voted with Joe Biden 100% of the time in 2023. 100% of the time. She voted against the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. She ranks smack dab in the middle of Democrats in the GovTrack ideology chart, which tries to put politicians where they land on a spectrum of liberal to moderate to conservative. She's right in the middle of the Democratic Party. She is no moderate. She is no centrist. She is a run-of-the-mill liberal Democrat. But the media is going to try to convince you she is a moderate, she's a centrist, she's Haley Stevens. She's not. She's not. She is not a socialist. She's not as far left as Abdul El-Sayed, but she's no moderate and she's no centrist. All right, speaking of Abdul El-Sayed, he had this embarrassing back and forth, and he very well could win. He very well could win this Democratic nomination in Michigan and then face Mike Rogers. I think Mike Rogers has the resume, the personality to win, even if the opponent is Abdul El-Sayed. But Democrats think that because of these victories they've had in these far left, deep blue congressional districts, that El Sayed could win in Michigan. He had a back and forth over the weekend with CNN Cassie Hunt, tweeting a couple of years ago about defunding the police, no funding for police. And Cassie Hunt saying, hey, you deleted those tweets. So what does that mean? Do you not believe that anymore? Are you going to fund the police? Do you want to abolish all prisons, as some DSA members have said? And Abdul El Sayed had big problems here trying to answer the question. This is actually in 3 parts. Had to break it up a little bit. The beginning of this question: why did you delete these defund the police tweets from a couple of years ago, Abdul El Sayed, with Cassie Hunt on CNN, cut 4?
So, Casey, in my time leading Wayne County's Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services, I had the responsibility of rebuilding a juvenile detention facility. I raised salaries 35% for workers there to make sure that the public health emergency that we had to call no longer existed. So judge me by my work rather than some deleted tweets, because you know what, nobody ever asked me across the 100, and I deleted all the tweets because I didn't want them to be taken out of context like this, so that you could distract from the actual conversation that Michiganders really want to have about what they want their leadership to actually fight for them to do.
Do you think maybe Michiganders want to know if a U.S. senator will vote to fund the police, or is a defund the police advocate, as his tweet said a couple of years ago? It might be an important issue for Michigan voters and maybe the rest of the country as well to know where he stands on this. He refuses to answer the question. Part 2. Casey Hunt continues to try to get an answer here from Abdul El Sayed. This is cut number 5.
Well, I think the question is just, if you're leading, would you fight to defund the police, or would you not?
I've already told you what I did. Judge me by my work. Judge me by my work. I funded the system because it needed to be funded. Too often, the conversation we have is fund or defund. The question that we don't ask is, what kind of system do we really want? I want us to be investing in the kinds of interventions that actually protect people, whether you're talking about people on the streets or people in law enforcement. That means investing in recruitment and retirement for law enforcement. It also means investing in community violence intervention, investing in behavioral health response, investing in public health and anti-poverty measures. Those are things that are not mutually exclusive. And I think this debate about 2020 and the ways that tweets are going to play are really nice on CNN if you want to get clicks. They're not that effective, and nobody really asks me about them on the streets or in communities in Michigan. So if you want to talk about housing or healthcare or corporate dominance in our politics, I think those are a lot more legitimate questions that people are actually asking me about what they want their next senator to do in the state of Michigan, rather than for clickbait in DC.
All right, still no answer from Abdul El Sayed whether or not he will actually fund the police, or still believes in defunding the police, as he tweets. Judge me by my work. Your work was tweeting defund the police. One more chance, one more try here. Cut number 6.
So voters shouldn't look at the fact that you deleted the tweets as evidence that you no longer support the things that you said. Then
Casey, you might. I
mean, listen.
Find that to be a really
I understand what you're
conversation.
saying about.
I'm just talking about what I hear about from people in Michigan.
I understand. But you deleted the tweets, right? That's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you about an action that you took. Okay.
And look, I'm talking about the action that I took to actually fund the juvenile detention facility to make sure that youth in that facility were safe. Now, tweets are not quite as much of an action as the work that I did when I was in public service. But I appreciate the line of questioning, and if you want to keep doing it, that's fine. But I'm just telling you that I think most people are more interested in whether or not you're fighting for their housing, whether or not you're fighting for their schools, whether or not you want to keep their tax dollars here at home.
More scrutiny on Abdul El Sayed this week, as there are now just 2 candidates in that race for Michigan Senate nomination on the Democratic side, and debates coming too. More next on Daybreak.
I slept
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in this morning, this Monday morning, easing you back into the work week after an Independence Day holiday weekend. Thanks so much for being alongside. Dennis Neal with us now. You know him and love him from work on CNBC and Fox Business, and you've read in places too. His latest book is Oregoners, talking about examination of Oregon's economic and social unraveling, leading people to leave the state. He's also left a place. He's left New York City after 40 years when Zoran Mamdani took office. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us. You're on Daybreak.
It's great to see you, and may the 4th be with you. I had a great weekend. I hope you did too. Yay, America, Scott.
Yes, despite strong thunderstorms and tree limbs coming down all over the place here in Michigan, I think most of us had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. In New York City, we saw the mayor, Zoran Mamdani, with his just scintillating, inspiring 4th of July message, surrounded by people who looked like they were in a hostage video, being forced to hold American flags, looking dour but unhappy about standing next to the mayor of New York. He most recently has his policy of rent control for a year being approved. Now, I'm a Midwestern guy, Dennis. I don't even really, I understand the concept of rent control, but how does this happen in New York City? Is it something that only exists in New York City? How long can this go on? How often does this happen? I know, I know from Seinfeld, right, about rent control, but how does it actually play out?
The worry is that something like this could spread, and it would be even worse for the housing market. I love what you just said about that picture and those people looking like they'd been taken hostage. And notice, Scott, they were legal immigrants who went and followed the rules. He didn't dare bring his illegal immigrant friends in there. Otherwise, ICE might show up, right? So rent control in New York City makes them look good. Oh, I kept a campaign promise. I'm freezing rents now. But in fact, what it means is that landlords, who even the city officials in charge of this stuff admit that their costs went up 5.3% in the past year, they can't raise their rents. That means they may not be able to afford good maintenance. That means they may fall behind. That means the city under Mamdani, because he recently talked about this, could seize those properties. Is this just a prelude to that? Now, there's 4 million or so housing units in New York City area. There's a couple million apartment rentals. Okay, 42% of that is these buildings that get rent regulated. You can't raise rents, and you can only raise it this much in a given year. And what that does is it raises rents for all of the other unregulated apartments. And we have a shortage in New York City of 400,000 housing units. Now, just in the past year, they had the highest number of housing starts since the 1960s, 38,000. At that rate, it's going to take more than 10 years to get rid of that housing shortage, which means rents will stay high. So this is a temporary artificial patch that will only lead to rents being higher, not lower, and it will only hurt more construction, not help it.
I want to break apart a couple things you said there. So yes, it's likely that if you are a landlord in New York, you don't just have one property. You probably have multiple properties, and not, if I'm understanding, not all properties are subject to this rent control. So it means that if you've got to keep rent stable in one location you have, but your costs still increase, that means places where you can raise the rent likely will be up and higher than it should be.
And you got to make it up somewhere, right?
Right.
You got to make it up somewhere is the problem. And so you own these where they strangle the price. So you raise your prices higher over here. And, you know, my landlord in New York, because I rented for 20 years after a divorce, alas. And my landlord in New York was a Greek immigrant, moved here with his family when he was only 6 years old. He had owned over 1,000 apartment units in Brooklyn. I mean, the man was amazing. And he said no one could do this today because of all of the regulations, the high taxes, and the ridiculous government boot on the back of the neck of developers. And it's a problem nationwide. You know, Scott, in Los Angeles, it takes up to 15 years to build a new apartment building from scratch because of government. Same in Oregon. Tina Kotek, the Democrat governor, vowed we're going to increase housing starts. They did like a few thousand despite all that effort. It's nothing. And they have a huge shortage of housing there. And so all of these socialist policies aimed at controlling prices are the opposite of capitalism, and they will lead to the opposite outcome of what they intend.
Dennis Neal is with us. Find more at Dennis Neal on X, Kneale. His latest book is Oregoners. You can find it out there at Amazon and elsewhere. All right, the other part of what you said, and I've seen this theory, because the mayor has said so explicitly, right? He wants the government to take some of these properties. Government owns more housing.
Yes.
So is it plausible that, by controlling the rent, you have landlords who have less money for upkeep? They allow the properties to get into disrepair. The city comes in and says, you're not taking care of the property. We're going to take it over. Is that a plausible series of events that you think could happen under this kind of policy?
I think it is. And in part, that's because of the brazen impunity of Kami Mamdani. Let's remember that New York City housing, the government's public housing projects are in disrepair. There's a building that was recently the subject of a Wall Street Journal editorial for hundreds of units without natural gas supply for cooking at home for months and months. And these are city-controlled buildings. In Brooklyn, I went to get my driver license. They set a noon appointment. They didn't serve me until 3:30. That's how government is. And yet we want government to take over privately owned apartment units and supposedly run them and do a better job of it. And yet Mamdani is drunk enough with power to think that, yeah, they could do a better job, but they can't. Otherwise, New York public housing wouldn't be the shambles that it is.
Yeah. Dennis, we got about 45 seconds here. My friend Carol Markowitz did the same thing you did. She left New York City. She's now down in Florida. What's the biggest difference that you've experienced heading south to the free state of Florida?
Well, gosh, I don't have to be embarrassed anymore or shy about talking about my political views and being conservative. I was a pariah in Brooklyn. That's great. But the weird thing also, Scott, is this place is so wild. The wildlife, the animals, the alligators, the otter in the pond right in back here. I mean, I cannot believe how wild it still is. And I got to write about that soon because it's just so strange. And people want the alligators, leave them alone, coexist. Be careful. Yeah, very wild.
Dennis Neal, you can find him on X at Dennis Neal. It's Kneale. Come back another time when I guest host. I want to talk more about Oregoners, the recent book. Find that at Amazon and elsewhere. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're off today, back tomorrow. Scott Bertram filling in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram or over at scottbertram.com. We'll talk with James Hohmann coming up in just about 5 minutes or so. The Mackinac Center here in Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, who may or may not be running for president in 2028. I think she will not. I think she is not running for president, but her national profile still is large. That profile taking another hit after this report from the Mackinac Center. Her subsidy deals delivering just 3% of promised jobs. We'll just discuss with James Hohmann coming up here in just a couple of minutes. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Tax Network USA. Do you owe back taxes or have unfiled tax returns filed every year but still keep owing? Retired and got hit with a surprise tax bill? Or are you a business owner with a tax bill you cannot afford? Maybe you took early money from your 401k. Now you owe. However your tax issue started, the result is the same. Your balance is not going down. Penalties grow. Interest compounds. Many of you are about to owe again this year with no plan in place. Stop what you're doing now. Call Tax Network USA. The IRS can garnish wages, levy bank accounts, even take your home or retirement. With more than 15 years in business, Tax Network USA, they've seen and resolved it all, helping taxpayers nationwide settle more than $1 billion in tax debt. Call 1-800-905-8000. That's 800-905-8000. They can help. Visit tnusa.com/RAV, R-A-V. That's tnusa.com/RAV. Hope you had a great Independence Day weekend. As I mentioned, strong thunderstorms here in Michigan, tree limbs down all over the place, power outages. I was at a Independence Day celebration party on Saturday night, and probably a third of the people there were saying, yeah, no power, but we're still having fun. Nothing you can do but wait for the power to come back on. Still tens of thousands without power here in Michigan as crews work to restore. And as I look out the windows here, we've got more rain. No wind here on a Monday morning, but hopefully power is back. I couldn't live very long without air conditioning. I wouldn't want to. More next. Daybreak with Scott Bertram filling in.
There's this
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for joining us on this Monday morning all across this great country. Steve and Ivy off today. They're back tomorrow on Tuesday. Scott Bertram filling in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram or over at scottbertram.com. James Homid is with us right now, Director of Fiscal Policy at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Mackinac.org for more. James, thanks so much for being alongside.
Good morning, Scott.
Report out last week from Mackinac on Governor Gretchen Whitmer here in Michigan. Subsidy deals deliver just 3% of promised jobs. I'll get to that in 1 minute, but we talk here to a national audience as well as a state audience across Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer has a significant national profile. She was talked about as being a potential presidential candidate or vice presidential candidate in 2024, certainly whispered about 2028. I personally don't think she's going to run in 2028, but that won't stop a discussion about it happening. As I look back on her profile, her accomplishments, I'm left a bit empty. She's well known for being wrong about COVID policy. I mean, at the time, she was praised for being right. She was clearly wrong about almost everything. And I think helped to usher in this.
Don't forget that.
What's that?
And she was also exercising unconstitutional authority, which is a black stain on her record.
Yep. And the other thing I would say, she helped usher in this era of Democrats using profanity in their promises, where she promised to fix the damn roads. And that hasn't happened here in Michigan either. As you sort of look at Whitmer as a national political figure, where does she hang her hat at differentiating herself among other potential 2028 candidates?
So, I mean, there are a lot of other people who are better at politics than I am. I do policy analysis, but she seems to be want to be a Democratic tastemaker, which is that my opinion is like what most Democrats can agree on. You should get behind me, which is different from other candidates who are trying to be, the most progressive person in the arena. So I think that's what she's going for, but I don't know. If you look at the betting markets, no one seems to have no one seems to be the front runner. Everyone seems to be seems to have a long road ahead of them. And it seems like the most popular candidate so far is none of the above.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about this report from Mackinac about some of the dent, I think, to a national profile of Gretchen Whitmer, which is she has spent billions of dollars in state money promising to attract jobs and create jobs in the state of Michigan. And in fact, when you look at the data, as Mackinac did, those promises fell far short of what the reality was after spending this money. So how much has been spent? Where was it spent? And what are the results that Michigan has seen?
Yeah, so it's a good time to review the governor's record. And so I wanted to look at all of her major job deals that she made over her term. And she made 8 of them. These promised $2.7 billion in direct payments and other cash payments, plus further tax breaks and other assistance. There were 8 deals of $2.7 billion to create 20,595 jobs. When we look at what has been spent and what we've gotten so far, we've spent $1.8 billion and we've gotten just 602 jobs, just 3% of what has been promised. Some of these deals have been canceled. There's 2 that resulted in big empty fields. We've got 2 battery plants that are still under construction. Maybe they'll deliver some jobs, and then ongoing operations at 2 auto factories that existed before the job deals were made.
So if you're here in Michigan, you might have heard about the SOAR fund, SOAR, which was promised by the governor as being some sort of closing fund to make the deal happen. When you look at these agreements that have been made, are they essentially unilaterally done by the governor? Meaning, does she have the authority, basically singular authority, to make these agreements with the companies?
So she doesn't have any money that's not already appropriated by the legislature, and the legislature did create the SOAR program. But yes, the critical industry program of the SOAR, which is involved in most of these deals, not all of them, allows the governor to give whoever she wants, however much money she wants, under whatever terms that she wants, with the only limitation being that it has to be approved through appropriations subcommittees as well. So yes, it is. And when we look at the structure of that program, it allows for companies to cash these checks over the short term, which is why we've paid so much already, but have not yet received the jobs. Now, there are clawbacks in these deals, but what that means is that we're going to have to wait, 7, 8, 9, 10 years if these companies don't perform before we can ask for our money back.
That was my next question for James Hohmann from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, which is, are there clawback provisions inside these deals? Meaning, if the jobs that are promised do not materialize, are there capabilities for the state to say, hey, give us our money back?
Yeah, and I want to say that's for some of the money, not all of the money. For instance, we spent 25 million doing site preparation for the Goshen deal. That money's gone. I mean, the Attorney General is going to try and get it back, but I'm pretty sure, like, when you're spending money for site preparation, there's no guarantee that those jobs are going to arrive. Same thing with this Mundy mega site. We've spent $200 million preparing it for a company that hasn't come. And regardless of whether a factory locates that site or not, that money's just gone. It's not coming back.
Now, we can and will criticize Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Whitmer, for these deals, but is there a larger point to be made here that perhaps we shouldn't be trusting governors to choose winners and losers when it comes to fiscal policy and economics?
Yes, I mean, that's the overall message for this, is that selective subsidy deals do not deliver on their promises. I mean, these were projects that our governor said were going to be generational, they were going to be transformational, they were going to lead the state to economic growth, and they just haven't. The most important thing that states can do, the tried and tested method for improving your economy, is by having the best business climate that's out there. I mean, this is why Utah and Idaho are some of the national leaders in job growth. It's not because they're writing the biggest checks to the biggest companies. They have the most conducive business climates. And that's what Michigan ought to be focusing on. And you can check out some ideas for how to improve the state's business climate by checking out our agenda at mackinac.org.
I know this is not specifically part of this report, but Mackinac has done work on right to work. And one of the big deals that Gretchen Whitmer and Democrats of the state did when they took the trifecta a few years ago was repeal right to work, making Michigan a less attractive place to do business. Do we have data or results from what's happened in the state since right to work's been repealed?
So, I mean, clearly Michigan's economy has been falling behind. It's been falling behind for a long time. I mean, the pandemic was bad for the state economy. Gretchen Whitmer shut down more businesses than every other governor, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a tough thing to recover from. Now, some states have. Michigan still doesn't have as many jobs, or sorry, it's around 1% more jobs than it had before the pandemic happened. And that's been a weak amount of job growth. Now, for right to work, I think it's been a negative. I don't have the precise econometric assessment about how much that has hurt us. But you can see that we've fallen even further behind since repealing right to work.
James Hohmann is Director of Fiscal Policy at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, mackinac.org, for more, including this new report. Gretchen Whitmer's subsidy deals deliver just 3% of promised jobs. James, thanks so much for jumping on this morning and joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate it. Scott Bertram filling in. Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber continues in It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're off today. Scott Bertram filling in. Steve and Ivy back tomorrow. We're joined by Margarita Mooney Clayton, an associate professor of practical theology at Princeton Theological Seminary, research fellow at Blackfriars Hall, Oxford University, founder of the Scala Foundation. You can find more about that online. And the author of the new book, When Mary Calls, Surprising Encounters with the Mother of God. It's on an imprint started by Eric Metaxas. So some good background there, too. Margarita, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Great to see you.
Good to see you again, too. We met some years ago here on Hillsdale's campus, and now, over the web. When Mary Calls, this story, 7 stories of people who are transformed by Mary's presence, the Mother of God. What kind of things were you looking for? Why were these important stories to tell?
Scott, I never thought I would write a book like this. I felt that I needed to write it because when I shared my own surprising encounters with Mary, the Mother of God, for example, as I share in the book, when I was smuggling money, religious items, Bibles, and rosaries to political dissidents in Cuba, and I was protected by Mary at the border. When I shared my own experience of profound spiritual healing on a pilgrimage to Fatima, which is a site of a Marian apparition in Portugal, what happened, Scott, was people I never would have expected to have a miraculous encounter with Mary started calling me and emailing me and wanting to speak to me about Mary because although they were Christian, maybe they weren't raised in a Christian household, and maybe they weren't attending a church where Mary's name was ever hardly spoken. And something seemed really urgent to these people to share their stories with me and to seek my insights as a scholar and a theologian about Mary in scripture, Mary in church tradition, and Mary as she binds us to the community of church, but also really importantly, because we just celebrated American Independence Day, how the Mother of God helps bind us together as a people and as a nation. And that's what I experienced in Cuba and wanted to bring back to this country where Mary has largely been forgotten in many churches, sadly.
How does your experience and the experience of the stories you share inside the book, what's different about this relationship with Mary than with other members of the church? A relationship with God, a relationship with how is this relationship with Mary different?
Well, let's look at scriptures. I don't think I realized until I worked on this book that Mary is the only disciple of Jesus present at all the moments of our salvation history. The Annunciation and Incarnation and birth of God, God taking form in the womb of a woman, but also Mary's at the crucifixion. She is standing there, and Jesus says, "Son, behold your mother, mother, behold your son." But really importantly, Scott, I had never actually pictured what Acts of the Apostles tells us, which is that Mary was in the upper room, united with the disciples, holding them together in unity and in prayer. And so what led me to write this book was that so many of us are looking for that kind of Pentecostal moment. And Mary was our first Pentecostal. She was there throughout the life of Christ, and she can show us who Jesus is better than any other figure in Scripture.
Margarita Mooney Clayton with us, her new book, When Mary Calls, Surprising Encounters with the Mother of God. Tell us briefly the story of James Macmillan. Echoes of the Annunciation is the chapter inside When Mary Calls.
I was astounded when a composer and conductor of great symphony music renowned around the world shared with me his story as a boy growing up as a Catholic in a rural, impoverished area of Scotland where all the coal mines had been closed. But the light of faith was still there, and he learned local music, brass band music, and he learned to love Mary and Jesus. But he shares with me his story going from total poverty to one of the world's most famous composers and learning to study scripture. He would study the scriptures for inspiration for his music. For example, he just wrote an oratorio, a prayer on 12 experiences with angels in scriptures. But he discovered through his study of scripture that Mary actually shows us why God commands us to be, or how it is that God calls all of us to become creative. So he says that Mary gave herself fully to God at the Annunciation. That's what we believe happened there. But how is that a model of creativity? Well, as soon as she receives the breath of the Holy Spirit, she responds by giving over her body, but she goes in haste and in love to her cousin Elizabeth, who praises her. And then she creatively draws on her knowledge of scripture to give all that praise back to God in the prayer or the canticle, really the song called the Magnificat. So from that, James draws a sense that as a creator, as an artist, we are not called to steal fire from the gods and somehow turn our back on God and assert ourselves. We have this modern image of the artist as like a Promethean demigod who can rise above humanity. James says, no. Mary shows us that authentic creativity is breathing in the Spirit, cooperating with God, and then bringing something beautiful into the world, which shows us a piece of the glory to which God calls us, but that we can only have through our free cooperation with God, as Mary did.
We are just about out of time here. Wonderful stories inside the new book, When Mary Calls, Surprising Encounters with the Mother of God. Margarita Moody Clayton, Associate Professor of Practical Theology at Princeton, Research Fellow at Blackfriars Hall, Oxford, founder of the Scala Foundation. You can find more about that online and find the book at Amazon.com and elsewhere. It is When Mary Calls. I'll get it in frame. There we go. Margarita, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless America.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy this morning. Back with more in just a moment here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertrand filling in on this Monday morning, getting you back into the work week after the Independence Day weekend. That includes a roundup of all things sports. Brock has that.
With a look at sports, I'm Brock Palmbush. ABC is reporting that after a call from U.S. President Donald Trump asking for a review, FIFA suspended the red card on U.S. soccer forward Folarin Balogun. Balogun received the red card in the team's round of 32 victory over Bosnia-Herzegovina last week. The red card suspension means that Balogun will be able to play in tonight's round of 16 match against Belgium in Seattle. There were 2 round of 16 matches yesterday at the World Cup. Norway eliminated Brazil 2-1, and England held on to beat Mexico 3-2. At Wimbledon, Jannik Sinner and Novak Djokovic both won fourth-round matches, but women's top seed Aryna Sabalenka was upset by Japan's Naomi Osaka. Also, Coco Gauff moved on to the quarterfinals. In golf, Chris Gotterup won the John Deere Classic in the Quad Cities, and in NASCAR, Chase Briscoe won the Euro 400 in Chicago. That's a look at sports. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Brock. Appreciate it. Also, my White Sox, Chicago White Sox fan, knocked off the Guardians yesterday, took the last 2 in that series to split things. The White Sox now a game up in the AL Central, though, it's not going to take much more than a 500 record maybe to win that division. So Guardians, even the Tigers still alive. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Puro Vets and Puro Clean's Veteran Initiative, which is the Puro Vet program. Veterans ready to be your own boss. Join a trusted brand and serve your community in a new way. 855-PUROVET or purovet.com, PUROVET.com, purovet.com. Hour 3 brings us Dan McLaughlin from National Review. We talk a bit about the Supreme Court cases, the decisions handed down last week. Jay Ford, Michael Letts also join us in hour number 3. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is being criticized by Will Wheaton. I think The Rock could break Will Wheaton in 2 if he wanted, but Dwayne Johnson had said he's not going to talk politics anymore. He wants to stay out of politics. He wants to be a storyteller and entertainer. It's not important what he thinks, and he just wants to entertain people. Will Wheaton says that's unacceptable. He's a coward, Will Wheaton wrote, that he won't talk about politics. Now Johnson endorsed Joe Biden in the 2020 election. He's been at least Trump, I want to say friendly, but not antagonistic toward Trump over the past few years. That's not enough. Will Wheaton says he's got to speak out about his politics. I'm going to take Dwayne Johnson in this matchup.
There's this place
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning on Daybreak, this Monday, June 6th of 2026. Thanks so much for joining us. Here are three big things you need to know. Number one, at least 25 people are dead because of the extreme heat that's been gripping half the nation. It is summer after all. More than 150 million Americans across the eastern U.S. subjected to some record-setting heat on the 4th of July. Heat alerts from the Midwest to the Deep South, to the Northeast. 25 people dead, nowhere near the number that passed away in Europe. We have air conditioning. They don't like it. That's a key difference. Air conditioning is a great thing, and it helps save lives, by the way. Number two, President Trump will host officials from the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ in the Oval Office this morning to mark the launch of new investment accounts for children. The Treasury Department introduced the Trump accounts July 4th, launching them, enabling contributions and providing an updated app for parents to fund accounts and access financial education tools. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the app was fully updated as of Saturday. And number three, Michigan state lawmakers will be banned from registering as lobbyists for 2 years after their term ends under a bill approved by lawmakers early on Friday morning. The bills also put governors, lieutenant governors, and department directors under the same 2-year ban. House Speaker Matt Hall says he's proud to close the revolving door and stop politicians from being lobbyists immediately after leaving office. That's where we start hour 3 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in on this Monday here at Hillsdale College, where I serve as general manager of the award-winning student radio station, WRFH, also a lecturer in journalism and director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You can find more about me at Scott Bertram on X, SCOTBERTRAM, and scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings. Thanks for being with us. We got a big hour 3. Too much show today. I asked the guys to stay an extra hour or two. They said, no, I understand. So we'll do as much as we can in this final hour of the program. And you can find other thoughts on X if you want, at Scott Bertram. Big news yesterday here in Michigan on the U.S. Senate race. Democratic nomination, Haley Stevens, Mallory McMorrow, and Abdul El-Sayed. Now one of the three are gone. That's Mallory McMorrow, the state senator, who has now taken herself out of the running. She was in a 3-way race. As I said, recent polling had indicated that her support had cratered, maybe close to 10%. Hard to say. Where do those voters go? There's one philosophy on the left that says, oh, this is some consolidation between Stevens and McMorrow. They don't want Abdul El-Sayed to win the nomination. They're ganging up on him. They don't want him to win. I'm not sure it's so cut and dried. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Mallory McMorrow yesterday releasing a video on X announcing she was dropping out of the race. Here's a little bit from that. This is cut number 12.
Now, I haven't been shy about calling for new leadership and a better Democratic Party. I mean it. The energy is there. People are crying out for change, and we owe it to them to listen. Then we need to build it up together from the ground up. So here's what we do next. Every day through November 3rd, we win this Senate seat, and we send Mike Rogers back to Florida for good. Whoever wins this primary on August 4th will have my full support. Then let's elect Jocelyn Benson as our next governor. Let's flip the state house and expand our majority in the state Senate. Let's elect Democrats up and down the ticket and show the rest of the country what it means to fight like Michigan.
All right, Mallory McMorrow in dropping out of the race yesterday. This is an interesting case, I think, here in Michigan. Mallory McMorrow made her fame, made her notoriety on being perhaps the most progressive member of the state Senate, at least taking the most progressive stance on a number of issues, being very loud and proud of that, getting viral videos, being very left in a party that was moving left. But in the end, what she found out is that you can't move far enough left when one of your opponents is essentially a socialist. And I say essentially because Abdul el-Sayed is not officially a Democratic Socialist of America member. He's not a DSA guy. He's just a Democrat, but he adopts and endorses the positions of the DSA. They're basically the same thing. El-Sayed really believes in being hard left, and you can't outcompete a person like that on the left flank of the party right now. And so she got stuck in between Stevens, who is no moderate and is no centrist, but at least a sort of mainstream leftist liberal Democrat, and the far left flank of Abdul el-Sayed. And whatever pop she had at the beginning of this race had long faded. By the way, the award for the bad timing award goes to the Detroit Free Press, who yesterday put out their endorsements for the primary. And as you can see right here on the opinion page, yesterday's Detroit Free Press, our endorsements in the August 4th primary, Democrat U.S. Senate, Mallory McMorrow. So the day that the endorsement comes out in the Free Press, McMorrow ends her campaign. That is a bad timing award going to the Free Press. Dan McLaughlin, who could have joined us in a few minutes, about 20 minutes here this hour, wrote yesterday, when you sell crazy, you can always be outbid by somebody who really means it. And I think that's what happened to Mallory McMorrow. She tried to get as hard left as possible. She was outbid by someone who really, really believes in that stuff. And we've heard from Abdul el-Sayed through the program today. This is what's going to happen, I think, in the Democratic primary for president as well in 2028. You have basically mainstream liberal Democrats who are trying to get as left as possible. J.B. Pritzker, maybe you throw Gavin Newsom in that part of the party. They're going to find that no matter how hard left they try to get, someone else is going to get farther left. Someone else is going to be an actual DSA member. Someone else is actually going to talk about socialism and endorse those planks. And they can't get farther left. It's going to be a problem. Now, again, when it comes to the Senate race in Michigan, I don't think that McMorrow supporters naturally flow to Stevens and thus sets up a more even race. In fact, a new poll out this morning, Dave Weigel and Semaphore have this. It is a pro-Abdul super PAC, so you have to take that into account. But they tested a two-way race before McMorrow dropped out. The result was a 20-point lead for Abdul el-Sayed. Sayed, 54%, and Stevens, 34% when they took McMorrow's name out of the race. Now, McMorrow will still be on the ballot. And by the way, early voting in Michigan means that people already have voted for McMorrow. And I believe there is some convoluted way you can get to your get to the Secretary of State's office or get to the local election branch and say, no, I want to recall my absentee ballot so I can vote for someone who's actually still in the race. This is another reason why early voting is bad. People casting votes for candidates who will then drop out of the race and their votes don't mean anything whatsoever. I don't think that her supporters naturally flow to Stevens. Maybe they're split in half, but I don't know if the fundamentals of the race have shifted all that much. I think as of right now, el-Sayed probably wins this primary, probably ekes out a victory. And Mike Rogers is the kind of candidate on the right, the kind of Republican who can actually prosecute this case against what is essentially a DSA member and win a Republican victory come November. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak. Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertrand filling in for Steve and Ivy. It's one for the price of two, as I like to say. Heading back in the world of music history, birthdays, death days, anniversaries, number ones on this day. We celebrate Phil Collins on this day in 1985. That's 41 years ago today. Took this track from No Jacket Required to the top of the charts on the Billboard Hot 100. Sussudio, number one on this day back in 1985. We're joined by Jay Ford. He's the author of Rustling of the Sycamores. You can find it at Amazon.com and elsewhere. Entrepreneur, speaker focused on resilience, personal growth, and purpose. Jay, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Very good. Hi, Scott. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Good to see you. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a bit about the book and what you were trying to accomplish, what readers can get out of the Rustling of the Sycamore.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the most important things that we're working on as an initiative is how do we get teenagers and young adults reading again? It's a cultural problem. It's a cultural war.
Mm-hmm.
They're attached to their phones. They're attached to manipulated content. They're attached to things that are driven by algorithms, which have a lot of an emotional response. We find that a lot of them are actually it actually can cause depression. So we're looking at what do we need to do to get kids, young adults, teenagers wanting to pick up books. So we've got a 3-part initiative that we think is helping and it actually is making a big difference. One is getting the parents more involved. So it's up to the parents to find that balance in the household. Maybe doing some time blocking in the afternoon or in the evening at some point. Make the children, make the young adults, make teenagers, make high schoolers put down the phone and pick up a book. If it's 30 minutes, if it's 45 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
if it's an hour, whatever you can squeeze out of them just to start to instill the habit of having to read. And so that seems to make a big difference. And so, of course, it gets them started on that path of changing some of those bad habits and focusing on changing to good habits. So that's an important area. The second one, which is also very important, is what we call the degree of separation. Because what we find is when a young adult, they're so used to their phones, when they put the phone down beside their bed or they put the phone down somewhere close and it's going off every 30 seconds or every 5 seconds or every 2 seconds as they're getting texts, as people are posting, they're distracted. So you almost have to have the phone not only a time blocked, but also a degree of separation. And then the third, which is where I come in, is good content. And we found that a lot of the writing over the last, because writing kind of went out of favor, it became very agenda driven. The content just wasn't there. So the purpose of this book is what I have found gives young readers and really all ages. In fact, I have senior citizens that love the book, but it gives them a really interesting, fantastic action adventure story. It's got historical context in it. It focuses on family. It focuses on God and religion, the kind of things that we want influencing our young adults, but also really good adventure and storytelling.
JayFord.com, FOARD is where to find a bit more about Jay and the book Rustling of the Sycamore. Personal responsibility, perseverance, the importance of being prepared for life's unexpected challenges. My friend and colleague here at Hillsdale, Todd Mack, 2 years ago, hiked the Camino in Spain with his family, which included kids, and basically had nothing but what they could fit in a small backpack for weeks at a time. And I interviewed him. I talked to him. He said, you will be shocked at how little you actually need to survive when you literally just need to survive. And the book is somewhat about that. There's a crippling attack on the United States, and their phones, and none of that stuff exists anymore. What do we learn about ourselves when we are just looking for those basic elements of moving from day to day?
And I think that's what makes the book so interesting. So basically, the father works in intelligence. He's overseas. The family are in the U.S. There's this attack. Now they're stuck. There's no communication. There's no phones. There's no online internet. They have to figure out how to survive in this new environment that they're thrown into, how to work together as a family, how to use critical thinking to overcome problems, The father ends up in a POW camp because there's this coalition going on in Asia where he's stuck. He has to survive and try to figure out how is he going to get home. And there's a lot of parallels. I've got a great part in there where there's a young Marine who has survival skills, very, very clever, one of the heroes of the story. But he runs into this young girl from South Korea who was in a boarding school, never caught a fish, never had to do, she was going to go to the College of Art in London. So all of a sudden he's helping her, and they've got this cultural thing going on where they're trying to figure out how to survive and how he can help her learn about survival skills. So all that's incorporated in the story, and it makes for fantastic storytelling. And I think it's really interesting for young readers, or all readers of all ages, actually. Yep.
Sure. We've got about 60 seconds, Jay. I like asking writers, authors this question. What's the case for young adults to read fiction? You read nonfiction, you're going to get facts, you're going to get data. Why should kids and young adults and everyone pick up a book of fiction?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, I think all fiction books, most of the time the writer puts in some historical reference. And this book has that. It's got a lot of historical context, things that are not taught in the schools that have to do with, how POWs have survived and been treated in the past, how different types of survival skills and true stories on things that I think are important. But so the fiction is an overlay. It's a way to be able to introduce characters and kind of drive a story. But behind that is a lot of fictional context. Historical context that gives the story more meaning and depth.
Jay Ford, author of Rustling of the Sycamore. You can find more at jford.com, F-O-A-R-D. Jay, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Dan McLaughlin with us in just a couple of minutes. I'll ask him about the U.S. Senate race here in Michigan, how it changed over the weekend. Also, he's written a lot about last week's Supreme Court decisions as well. That's in about 8 minutes or so here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertrand filling in. Don't forget, you can find the show at Steve Gruber Show on X, stevegruber.com online. Look for the podcasts if you miss anything or want to hear it again, see it again, share with friends. stevegruber.com, click on podcasts. You can also find the audio anywhere you get your audio. And over at Rumble, all the video of today's show will be there as well. I wanted to play that. We've been talking a lot about the Michigan Senate race this morning. Mallory McMorrow has dropped out. Got a two-way race now between far left Abdul El-Sayed and the more mainstream liberal. I will not call her a moderate or a centrist. She's not. We went over that data earlier. Haley Stevens. Abdul El-Sayed, this was posted on his account over this Independence Day weekend. I want you to hear him talk. The more he talks, less he makes sense. He had this big back and forth with CNN over the weekend where he simply would not say, I will fund the police. And here he talks about school funding. Listen to this. Abdul El-Sayed, Democrat, running for U.S. Senate here in Michigan, cut number 9.
Why don't our schools get the funding that they deserve? Well, because there's not a lobby for schools. Kids don't have a corporate PAC. And so the question for us is, are we willing to address those issues? Are we willing to stand up, take on the politics that has us bombing other people's schools instead of investing in our own?
All right, there's Abdul Al Sayed from the weekend, at least posted over the weekend. No lobby for schools. There's no corporate PAC for school. Is he not aware that teachers' unions exist? Is he not aware the amount of money spent by teachers' unions to secure more funding? And remember, now in New York City, we're spending $40,000 per student. In Chicago, where the CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, is now the most powerful political entity in the city of Chicago, well north of $20,000 per student per year. Of course there's lobbyists for schools. Of course there's a corporate PAC for schools. It's the teachers' unions funneling union dues back to Democrat politicians to do their bidding. It makes no sense. That argument makes no sense whatsoever. Dan McLaughlin up next from National Review. I'll ask him about the Michigan Senate race, and then we'll get into some of the Supreme Court decisions from last week before the Independence Day holiday. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Steve and Ivy off today, back tomorrow. Scott Bertram filling in, heading back to 1968. The Rolling Stones hit #1 in Billboard singles charts with this one, just used for an ad for Amazon, something? Jumpin' Jack Flash, one of the more iconic riffs in rock and roll history, played by Keith Richards. Rolling Stones with new music out very soon. I don't think it's out yet. but soon, some songs out, some singles out. Jumpin' Jack Flash, number one of this day back in 1968. Dan McLaughlin with us here, senior writer at National Review Online. Find him writing at nationalreview.com, also on X at Baseball Crank. Dan, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good to be here.
A lawyer in a previous life before writing full-time for National Review. And we'll talk SCOTUS in a sec, Dan, but you also follow the Senate races very closely across the country. I've seen your spreadsheets, I know. Here in Michigan, we went from a three-way race to a two-way race as Mallory McMorrow drops out, and we now have Abdul El-Sayed, the far, far left, DSA and everything but name, and the more centrist, not a centrist politician, the more centrist Democrat, meaning the center of the Democratic Party, in Haley Stevens. I'm not sure the dynamics of this race change a whole lot with McMorrow dropping out. Her polling had cratered recently. I don't think her supporters are necessarily lock, stock, and barrel moving over to Haley Stevens. Some of them are very far left on the political spectrum. How do you see this Michigan Democratic Senate race changing, if at all, after McMorrow drops out?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's little question that McMorrow dropping out, a year ago would have been good news for Stevens. Because I think a two-way race allows her to posture herself as, again, within the atmosphere of this race, the, sort of the sane candidate. I mean, El-Sayed, there's no question El-Sayed, this is going to be a race that favors Democrats. The national atmosphere favors Democrats, but El-Sayed is so far out there that, I think this race and the race in, if he gets the nomination, this race and the race in Maine, maybe the two nationally in which Democrats could do what Republicans did back in the, used to do back in the Tea Party era and did in 2022 as well, which is just take a good year and nominate some people who blow races that they should have won.
This is a purple state, Michigan. We've seen some of these DSA members win in New York City, in Colorado most recently, last week, and they don't have any real competition in the general election. This would be a tightly contested race with a Republican backed by Donald Trump in Mike Rogers, who's a formidable candidate who I think has the temperament to appeal not just to conservatives and Republicans, but sort of normies in the center of the political spectrum here in Michigan. I'm not sure if Democrats get what they think they want in El-Sayed, they don't get what they really want, which is a victory.
Yeah, and I mean, Rogers certainly is not a guy who's going to blow the race, right? If Rogers loses, no matter who his opponent is, if Rogers loses, it'll be because the environment's just against him. He ran very close to Trump in 24. He's a seasoned candidate. He's a guy who's going to be able to appeal to your Trump Republican, your Bush Republican, your, whatever your species of Republican is, he'll get them to look at him and El-Sayed in particular and say, we're definitely going with Rogers.
Dan McLaughlin with us, also writing about Supreme Court issues over at nationalreview.com. We had rulings, opinions handed down last week before the holiday weekend, Dan. A number we could talk about, but probably want to lead with the opinion on birthright citizenship, a divided court, as it's always described, and a lot of fractured opinion on the right among conservatives about exactly what this opinion means. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it awful for our country? What should we learn, or what do we learn perhaps about reading deeper into some of the opinions issued by the justices on this case?
Yeah, and we had a 5-1-3 decision because Kavanaugh was basically with the dissenters on the constitutional rule, but he thought that Trump should lose the case based on statutes. I think it's a very weak argument, but it's certainly a idiosyncratic one. There's really two important things to know about this case. The first is that all it really does is keep the status quo. Now, people are frustrated with that, but nobody now alive remembers there being any other rule than what the court decided. And it was reaching back to a precedent from 1898. Right. The other thing is there are two parts of Trump's order, right? He was trying to deny birthright citizenship to children of transients, to deal with the birth tourism problem, and also children of illegal aliens, which is a much larger number of people. But the illegal aliens part of the case wasn't close. Even a couple of the dissenters, Thomas basically tossed into a footnote that he wasn't sure about the issue. Gorsuch kind of threw up his hands and said, I'm not sure that. So really, Trump got kind of routed on that issue. But it was a much closer case on the transience question. And I
Mhm.
think there is some much more substantial historical basis for Justice Thomas's argument that transients weren't intended to be covered because the government back in 1866, when they wrote this language in the 14th Amendment, in those days, it was still very seriously considered that governments protected their own citizens even when they were abroad. So you weren't really fully subject to American jurisdiction if you were, say, a Frenchman or, a Chinese traveling here.
Dan McLaughlin at National Review. We've got about 2 minutes or so here. There's a handful of cases maybe we can throw into a big bucket called executive power. And I mean, certainly birthright citizenship is one of those too. But in terms of how the president can fire certain appointees, what did the Supreme Court say about the depth and perhaps the limits of executive power?
Yeah, and also immigration. I mean, Trump won. People are mad about birthright citizenship. Trump won. There were 3 big immigration cases right at
Mhm.
the end. He won all of them, including saying that judges can't even review his decision on temporary protected status, which involves a lot of people from a lot of third world countries. The big firing issue, conservatives have been fighting about this for a long time. It's not just a Trump thing; goes back to the Reagan years, at least. In fact, it goes back to an opinion by William Howard Taft when he was Chief Justice in the 20s, that John Roberts was basically saying, "Look, Taft had it right the first time. His decision kind of got overruled in the 30s, and it shouldn't have been. So we're bringing the fat man back." So that basically that rule says that look, if you work for the executive branch, at least in a policy making role, heading an agency, um, Trump has to be able to fire you. The president has to be able to fire you if he wants because he's in charge. The Constitution gives the executive power to one man only, and it ain't you, head of the FTC. So where this got complicated is that Roberts and Kavanaugh, along with the liberals, but the liberals don't believe in the principle anyway. But Roberts and Kavanaugh really did not want to extend this principle to the Fed. And they had some
Mhm.
historical arguments about how central banks are different. But I think they also reached out to decide the constitutional question in that case when they didn't really need to, because Trump wasn't even arguing that he could remove the head of the Fed, the leaders of the Fed, like for any reason at all. He was trying to argue a for cause firing. So he has been limited and constrained, but only with the Fed, which now creates this kind of weird all-powerful fourth branch of government.
Right, and without this decision, you have a much larger, though, unelected, unaccountable branch that people have been talking about for a while here. And so at least this gives some power for a new president, whether it be Donald Trump or someone else, to say, "You guys, you work at my pleasure. I'm the president."
Yeah,
Dan
and
McLaughlin.
with that comes accountability.
That's right. Dan McLaughlin, you can read him more at nationalreview.com. Follow his tweets, his posts over on X at Baseball Crank. Dan, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thanks.
Thank you. Scott Bertrand filling in. More next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. On this day back in 2020, the great Charlie Daniels passed away. Devil went down to Georgia. Whole other slew of great songs. Pretty good conservative, too. Charlie Daniels, I believe 81 years old, passed away on this day in 2020. Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy this morning here on Daybreak. Thanks so much for being alongside as we guide you into the work week after an Independence Day holiday weekend. Michael Letts with us, law enforcement veteran, more than 30 years of experience, founder, president, CEO of Invest USA. That's investusa.org. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Scott, it's always a privilege to be with you. We thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I heard you were active in Washington, D.C. over the weekend, helping a bit with security for the big festivities. Did you at least have a little fun, too?
Oh, well, at 100 degrees, it's hard to have fun outside at that temperature, Scott. But yes, it's always a wonderful experience. So much has happened in D.C., been able to bring the crime down, been able to make it a much more enjoyable place to visit, and we're headed the right direction.
Absolutely. I know that you're also talking about, involved with Operation Take Back America, this operation against human smuggling, which is a bigger problem than I think people realize. I know, like the Michigan Association of Broadcasters, who I'm involved with, have made it a priority this past few years, creating public service announcements about human smuggling. It's a bigger deal in Michigan, even than people might think it is because of our location, of course, right along the northern border. What kind of problem is human smuggling across the country, and what's the goal of Operation Take Back America?
Well, it's a huge issue, and let me explain to our listeners and our viewers why. Because people think of the drug cartels and they're just funneling drugs. Actually, that's not the case. They're just as heavily involved with human and child sex trafficking, one of the most prolific and one of the most profitable businesses in the globe. And so when we shut down the southern border, they're losing over $1 billion a year. Now, when you're losing billions of dollars because of new administration's policies, they're not very happy about that. So they're trying to find every way possible to be able to exploit these children and their and females and other human sex traffickers that they're putting through. And so it's become a major issue. And what are we going to do about it? Well, the key is we have to dedicate the resources. It's not that we don't have the ability to do it, Scott. It's just that in the past, we haven't dedicated the resources. In fact, we've been part of the problem. We've had whistleblowers that have come in and said that we've had people that have on the border have helped smugglers get these people across. We've had people that have been involved, even in law enforcement sometimes, that have been helpful in terms of transporting them around the country. Why is it such a big issue? Because, it's not just here in America, Scott. It's global. And the place to get people moved the easiest, facilitate them the easiest, is to bring them to America first and then use this as a trafficking point from there. And that's what we're seeing happening. And, of course, the operation, this administration is determined that we're going to break the back of human sex trafficking, especially these children. Scott, they did nothing wrong. And to be subjected to such hideous exploitation is just simply mind-boggling, and we're determined to break their back. We've already rescued over 100,000 children that have been gone missing over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're determined to get every one of them back and held accountable.
We saw a couple of weeks ago, and the last time I filled in for Steve here, a big announcement from the Trump administration about finding these minors who came across the border in some way, shape, or form, and then the Biden administration simply lost track of them, didn't know where they were. Thousands have been found by the Trump administration, but thousands more still aren't found. We don't know where they are. How many of them, I don't know if there's a raw number or a firm number we can put on this, but how many of them perhaps are involved in this human trafficking problem as you describe it?
Well, it depends on who you want to believe. And you were listening to the Biden administration, they at least admit to over 350,000 went missing. We think the number is more like 750,000. We have recovered over 200,000 of them so far. Here's the question, Scott. It's as we recover them, what are we doing to provide to make sure that we can treat these children and put them back in a productive society? They've been so traumatized. This is not just a matter of saying, oh, sorry, it happened to you. Here, we're going to send you home. They really need special treatment, special counseling, special medical assistance. We're in the process of trying to do that. One of the things Invest is doing is we're creating a ranch called Broken Arrow Ranch as a transitioning position for these children, because we're bringing in so many, and we've got to figure out how to make sure they're most equipped to be able to survive after this.
Michael Lutz with us, Invest USA, investusa.org for more information about that organization. What are some of the real big challenges that law enforcement is facing in trying to ID and then even prosecute those who are involved in these human smuggling operations?
We've got a number of things. That's a great question, Scott. Thank you so much for asking. Some of the main things or problems are this. First of all, you've got all these radicals, shall we say, that are saying ICE doesn't need to do the job. Who do you think is being able to pin down where these children are at? It's ICE. So when you decide to go out and protest ICE, realize that you're protesting rescuing a child. Let that sink in for a little bit. Second of all, is we've got some people that have been involved in administrations in the past that need to be held accountable. We've got some corrupt people in government still that we're rooting out that help facilitate all this matter. And thirdly, though, one of the biggest things that we have, the problem that we're doing, is just a lack of recognition and a lack of awareness. America, this is a huge issue. And if you were ever to see one of these children, see what the tears in their eyes, it would change you for life, and you would make sure that we want to eradicate this from our country. So please, while we have 250 years of freedom and liberty, these children don't. They don't get a second chance. Make sure that you prioritize this and that we as a nation determine that we're going to eradicate it from America.
Hey, we've got just a very brief amount of time. If people are out there and they see something, what are some of the signs they might want to look for?
Oh, God, a number of things. Watch children, okay? I know sometimes we don't want to do that, but a lot of times when they seem confused, when they seem fearful, when they don't want to be around somebody, there's a reason behind it. No, I'm not asking you to go and interrupt families, etc. But if you see, just a single person with more than one child, and this is what I tell our law enforcement personnel, when they're bringing in kids and they're bringing in the different kids, it's the same person bringing, these are another 4 or 5 kids I've got. You just brought in 4 or 5 different kids last week. There's a red flag. There's something wrong there. And let's make sure that we start paying attention to our surroundings and the children that are around us.
Michael Letz, more at investusa.org. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're back tomorrow with you. Scott Bertram filling in. More at Scott Bertram on X, scottbertram.com. For all my media doings, this portion of the program brought to you by Patriots Relief. The hot summer sun is here. With it comes our country's 250th birthday celebration, of course. Patriots Relief has the perfect CBD healing solution for you. Summer fun means getting out, being active. The grueling sedentary winter came before this. With our country's big celebration here, got to make sure our bodies are prepared for the activities that summer demands. Patriots Relief CBD can assist in alleviating those aches and pains so you can enjoy your favorite summer activities, not let pain get in the way. Call Tim and his family, 877-230-1776, or visit patriotsrelief.com. Use the promo code Gruber for 40% off and free shipping when you order at patriotsrelief.com. 877-230-1776, promo code Gruber at checkout. Don't let pain slow you down this summer. Patriots Relief CBD at patriotsrelief.com or 877-230-1776. Thanks to our guests throughout today's program: Greg Creel from Red Flags Press in Hour 1, Dennis Neal, Hour 2, James Homan and Margarita Mooney Clayton in Hour 2, Jay Ford, Dan McLaughlin, and Michael Letts here in Hour 3 of the program. If you missed anything, check out the podcast feed for audio and video over at Rumble as well. Behind the scenes doing a great job of getting that stuff together. And if I can recommend, back to the very beginning of the program, very first segment where we laid out this contrast, and the second segment between the vision of America that Zoran Mamdani laid out on July 4th, surrounded by people holding American flags, looking incredibly sad and not happy to be there and not celebrating anything about this country, and President Trump, who gave a wonderful speech July 4th Eve, not Eve, that's the day before, July 4th evening in Washington, D.C. Mamdani says, we don't like the country the way it is. What we love about the country is what it could be and how we can change it. That's not what the president says, and that's not what we think. And this is going to be a big contrast in 2026 and beyond. Those who love the country and are proud of the country, and those who have no love for it and no pride in it. Steve continues those thoughts tomorrow here on Daybreak.
There's this